Okay, class, let's get started talking about the ending of the Odyssey. So I'm calling this Restoring Home. I'll talk more about this image later on in the slides. Okay, so here are my goals for today. We're going to set the scene for the slaughter of the suitors. This is basically the thing that everyone's been waiting for. The suitors have been a problem since the beginning of the Odyssey. In these books, we're setting the scene for this kind of carnage that will punctuate the latter books of the Odyssey. I'll go through the different ways the scene is set for these guys to die. We're going to talk about the axe contest, which is a very strange moment in the Odyssey. We'll discuss that, what it sort of represents, why it's there. We'll ask this very difficult question. Some people wonder, it might make sense for the suitors to be slaughtered, but why do Odysseus and Telemachus kill all of the slaves that they own, and especially the young women in their family? Why is that necessary? Okay, then we'll talk about, this is sort of related to the axe contest, but testing as a theme in the Odyssey as a way to understand the reconciliation of Penelope and Odysseus through this final test of Penelope's. And then we'll be able at the end to kind of ask this question, is order really restored at the end of the Odyssey? Everything sets up for us as readers to believe that order should be restored, but there are some hints at the end of the Odyssey that maybe not everything is perfect. So, okay, but by the end we'll have kind of a nice resolution to the broader themes of the Odyssey. And Odysseus will finally reach home, and what that means. Okay, so let's set the scene for slaughter in book 20. So there's several ways that Homer does this. One is by drawing out this idea that's been present throughout the epic, but here he draws it out in this kind of really fun way, in my opinion. People as food. Okay, so this is in book 20. This is the book where Odysseus is kind of psyching himself up to slaughter all the suitors. Remember, he's doing this kind of largely on his own. He'll have his son to help him, but really it's two guys against a bunch. Like, I think there's like 50 suitors or something. There's a lot of suitors. Okay, so this is Odysseus. He's still in disguise as a beggar, but he's kind of psyching himself up for what's going to come when he kills all these young men. Okay, so Odysseus slapped his chest and told himself, "Be strong, my heart. You were hounded by worse the day the Cyclops ate your strong companions, but you kept your nerve, till cunning saved you from the cave. You thought that you would die there." So his heart held firm and constant, but he writhed around as when a man rotates a sausage full of fat and blood. The huge fire blazes, and he longs to have the roasting finished. So he squirmed this way and that, and wondered how he could attack the shameless suitors being one against a multitude. Okay, so I really like this passage a lot. There's a lot going on here. So first he's doing the psyching himself up, and he does it through reference to this part of his story that had to do with cannibalism, really, or eating humans. You were hounded by worse the day the Cyclops ate your strong companions. So he reminds himself that, like, he's been through tough times before. He thought he might die in the Cyclops cave, but he was able to outsmart the Cyclops and be triumphant and get out of the cave. So he's one against a multitude here, but he might trust to his cunning and his strategy and strength to get out of this situation too. So he's kind of like reminding himself how great he is. But then this simile is really interesting. Okay, so his heart held firm and constant. Okay, but he writhed around as when a man rotates a sausage full of fat and blood. So like or as signals a simile in English. So he's writhing around. That means kind of like wiggling and kind of squirming. He's squirming around as when a man rotates sausage. So how does the simile make sense? Do you, when you're hungry, when you're cooking yourself like a hot dog or like a sausage or something, are you like, you're hungry, right? So maybe you would kind of wiggle around a little bit. Like, you're like, oh man, I'm super hungry. I want to cook up this sausage. The huge fire blazes. He longs to have the roasting finished. So it's kind of interesting. So he starts off comparing himself to a man who is cooking sausage and who longs to have the roasting finished because he's so hungry. It's like, okay. But then the simile continues. So he squirmed this way and that and wondered how he could attack the shameless suitors. He squirmed this way and that. There's kind of a slip here where Odysseus So he starts off being compared to the man rotating sausage because he's hungry, to becoming, in a way, the sausage himself. If you've ever cooked meat on a stove or like a pan, you probably have noticed how the chemical changes of cooking will make the meat kind of like wiggle around a little bit. It looks like it's moving. And I find this really interesting because, especially because the opening part up here was a moment when humans were food. So there's kind of a situation here where like Odysseus is in a position where either he'll eat or maybe he'll be eaten, you know, similar to the times when his men were eaten by the Cyclops. So this is kind of a very tricky moment when the tide of battle could turn. You know, he's either in control and the chef, or he's the one being potentially eaten as the sausage. So yeah, Homer's trying to kind of capture the excitement of cooking in this way, and the fact that you could be eaten. This is important for a lot of reasons, not only because of the eating themes that we've talked about already in the Odyssey, but I'll remind you of other origin stories where eating was an issue. The things that are eaten and can be eaten, and the things that shouldn't be eaten, are, you know, they've been a feature in this book and also other early stories. Also, the slaughter of the suitors takes place in the dining hall at Odysseus's kingdom. So there's something going on with murder and food in these books. Okay, so that's one way to set the scene for slaughter, comparing humans to food again. Here's another way, and this is also in book 20. This is kind of more about apocalypse. So this term apocalypse, I think in English it's largely derived from sort of the Christian tradition of a revelation, when supposedly the second coming of Christ will happen, and it signals the end of the world. Anyway, these sort of ideas about the end of the world feature in some early ancient. They feature in a lot of ancient stories. Here's kind of a scene of this, I think, in the Odyssey. What's described here is really frightening. Perfect for Halloween. Okay, so this is, again, in book 20, when the suitors believe everything's fine, when Odysseus is in disguise and plotting their slaughter. Okay, so Athena is there helping Odysseus. She turned the suitors' minds. They laughed unstoppably. They cackled, and they lost control of their own faces. Plates of meat began to drip with blood. Their eyes were full of tears, and they began to wail in grief. The prophet Theoclymenus addressed them. So he was a prophet who came with Telemachus back to Ithaca. So this is what the prophet says. "What awful thing is happening to you? Your faces, heads, and bodies are all wrapped up in night. Your screams are blazing out like fire. The ornate palace ceilings and the walls are spattered with your blood. The porch is full of ghosts, as is the courtyard, ghosts descending into the dark of Erebus. The sun has vanished from the sky, and gloomy mist is all around." So this is a scene, we would probably call this a scene of apocalypse, because things are happening that shouldn't be happening. Meat, so plates of meat. So meat is typically food that has been cooked already, but it's kind of, you know, going back in time, it's dripping with blood now. They were laughing, the suitors were laughing unstoppably and cackling, but then their eyes start to be filled with tears and they begin to wail in grief. Then there's these scenes of night and sort of like hell in a way. Night, fire blazing, the spatter of blood on the walls. It's unclear whether Theoclymenus sees the future here. He might see the sort of what's coming. The suitors will be splattered. The suitors will be killed, and those ceilings of the palace will be splattered with their blood. So maybe he's seeing the future, but perhaps also he's just seeing a vision of hell. You know, the scenes of fire and night and ghosts kind of remind us maybe of, you know, the other side. Erebus is, if you look back at your Theogony, Erebus is one of the founding original creative figures, along with Chaos and Eros and Gaia. Erebus is roughly translated to being like the abyss, like the darkness of space or nothingness. So Erebus is kind of the scary sort of void. Where chaos is everything spinning at once. Erebus might be nothing, just complete blackness. So anyway, this is pretty horrifying too. Like if this actually is literally happening, yikes, something bad is going to happen. Something apocalyptic or like world ending might be happening in book 20. Okay, so that certainly sets the scene for something bad happening. And then we have this kind of more fairy tale kind of thing that happens that also sets the scene for the slaughter. There's the axe contest. Okay, so here it's Penelope's idea to do this axe contest. Stay tuned also, there will be an axe contest in the Ramayana, so it's kind of interesting that old stories like these sort of tests in a way. Okay, so Penelope says to the suitors who are assembled, so this might reveal that she knows that her husband is present, but maybe not. Okay, Penelope says, "Now listen, lords, you keep on coming to this house every day to eat and drink, wasting the wealth of someone who has been away too long. Your motives are no secret. You want to marry me. I am the prize. So I will set a contest. This great bow belonged to godlike King Odysseus. If anyone can grasp it in his hands and string it easily and shoot through all 12 axes, I will marry him and leave this beautiful rich house so full of life, my lovely bridal home. I think I will remember it forever, even in my dreams." Okay, so I mean, this even sounds kind of like a fairy tale sort of thing. There's a contest, and the end result of the contest will be a marriage. Okay, great. So let's talk about this axe contest. It's kind of strange. First off, let's visualize it. Okay, so what's going on is you need to be able to string a bow. So this great bow belonged to her husband, if anyone can grasp it and string it easily, and then shoot through all the axes. So there's different parts of the contest. So first you have to be able to string the bow. Okay, so bows, if anyone has done archery, you know this kind of thing, but how a bow works when you're doing archery, like bows and arrows, is there's like tension in the material of the bow that is transferred into the energy, the potential energy of the string that you pluck. And then when you have like an arrow that's like here, up and down, you transfer the potential energy of the string, which comes from the tension in the bow, towards the arrow, and then you can like launch the arrow really far, depending on how good you are at this kind of stuff, and aiming. Okay, so first off, the bow itself is really hard to string. So this bow is probably made out of wood. So it would be like carved out of like a tree probably that has this like round shape originally. But then you pull the handles of the bow backward and then string those here and here. But even doing that will be really difficult. So to visualize that, I have this image of an old coin from the 5th century of Thebes, which is in Greece. So this is a Greek guy. You can tell because he's naked. Ha ha ha. Greeks really like naked dudes in their art. But anyway, so like notice the contortion this dude is putting his body through in order to string this bow. So he's got like one heel of his foot behind one of the little crooks of the bow. So he's using his one leg, and then he puts the other leg over the bow to kind of bend it back, and then with his arms, he's got like one hand on the string and the other hand on the other like hook of the bow. But notice it's a full body thing trying to string this bow. Really difficult. And in fact, when we come to the part of the axe contest, it's narrated as difficult for the suitors to actually string this thing. Like no one can really do it, except for Odysseus and maybe Telemachus. Okay, and then so that's one part of the contest. Is first you have to be strong enough to maneuver this really tense bow, into the proper shape for archery. And then you have to shoot an arrow through 12 different axe heads. Now, I've always found this very difficult to imagine, like, what is going on? I like this way of imagining it. It makes the most sense to me. There's probably other ways to imagine it too, but axes, these are axe heads, so it's like the one part of the axe is buried and the other part is here, but like an axe with two sharp sides on either end, and then this hole in the center would be where like the stick would go, you know, to wield an axe. So anyway, you take all the axe heads off their little sticks and then set them up such that all of the holes align, and there's 12 of them, so you have to be able to like aim your arrow through, so you have to perfectly aim it so that it can go through all the axe heads. So of course this would be really difficult too. It also would be difficult to set up, to be honest. Like, this is kind of crazy. So anyway, this is kind of an impossible contest, supposedly, but it is something that Odysseus could do in his youth. So that might be something going on here. Like, maybe Penelope, in her test, if she knows her husband is present, she might be testing him to prove he's still the same man that she knew when she got married to him. So it might be a test. I mean, it's a test he can pass, or that he has been able to pass in the past, but maybe this is a sort of a test of, like, you know, his abilities now. He's an older man now. It's 20 years since he's done this. Can he still do it? You know, can he still be the man that she's used to? That kind of thing. So it's very, like, you know, it's kind of a cheeky contest here. Okay, so here's the contest, and I title this Telemachus, What Are You Doing? Because it gets very strange, like, what ends up happening. So, okay, Telemachus addresses everybody. So, Zeus must have made me stupid. My dear mother, despite her usual common sense, has said that she will marry someone else and leave this house. But I am laughing, and my heart feels foolish gladness. Well, come on, you suitors, you want this prize. A woman unlike any in holy Pylos, Argos, or Mycenae, or here in Ithaca, or on the mainland. No woman in Achaea is like her. There is no need for me to praise my mother. You know her worth. So do not make excuses. Do not put off the contest of the bow. We want to watch. And I will try myself. If I succeed in stringing it and shooting it all through, I will no longer mind if mother goes off with someone else and leaves me here. Success would prove me man enough to carry my father's arms. Okay, so this is quite interesting. Telemachus, what are you doing? First, he sounds a little strange here, you know. He's like talking about how great of a match his mother is, a woman unlike any elsewhere. No one in Achaea or Greece is like her. You guys know her worth. There's no need for me to praise her. We want to watch you guys try to win my mother's hand in marriage, and I will try myself. This is quite odd. Why does he volunteer himself to do this bow contest? Does he want to marry his mother? You know, this is sort of quite strange here. He also insulted his mother's intelligence. It's very strange. I wonder what you guys think he's doing here. One little bit of a clue that makes it less incestuous is what he says down here. If I succeed in shooting this through, I'll no longer mind. If mother goes off with someone else and leaves me here, success would prove me man enough to carry my father's arms. So in one way, if he's able to string this bow and do the shot that his father used to do, he would prove himself to be just the kind of man his father was, like strong enough to take his father's place as the sort of ruler of Ithaca. It might not necessarily mean he's strong enough to take his father's place as his mother's husband. You know what I mean? So anyway, this is probably something that a lot of us feel, you know, as the children of parents. Sometimes you test yourself to see how capable you are by, you know, using the stories of your parents and then kind of testing yourself. Like, here's an example from my life. I remember when I turned the age my mother was when she had me. That was like kind of a moment for me to think about, like, whoa, am I in a position to have a child right now? So it was a way of sort of testing the waters and seeing, you know, like, am I as mature as my parent was, or am I as capable as my parent was at their time of life, you know, that kind of thing. So anyway, it doesn't have to be incestuous, or it could be. Very interesting. Okay, so it continues. Telemachus stood up straight and tall, tossed off his purple cloak, unstrapped his sword, and dug a trench to set the axes up all in a line, and trod the earth down flat. They were amazed to see him work so neatly, though he had never seen it done before. He stood astride the threshold and began to try the bow. 3 times he made it quiver, straining to draw it back. 3 times he failed to string the bow and shoot it all through the axes. He would have tried a 4th time. He was keen to keep on pulling, but Odysseus shook his head, stopping. So he's really trying. He seems more capable of more capable than the other suitors to be able to string the bow, but he can't quite do it. Even though he keeps trying, Odysseus is like, dude, no, like let daddy take over is the kind of idea here. So, so this might be a moment where Telemachus kind of steps up into the role of the sort of patriarchal figure, the father figure, but then like he has to step down a little bit because he's not quite ready yet to fill the shoes of his father, particularly in becoming his mother's husband. You know what I mean? So, okay, interesting though. But yeah, to go back to this, you guys have said in the past that like Telemachus has some interesting connections to his. It's not just that he's dealing with how to be a good Greek man like his father. He's sort of a rival to his father in a way, and I think it comes to a head in this moment here. Yeah. Okay. All right. So then, more setting the scene for slaughter. So no one can string the bow. Odysseus, however, is able to do it, and then we have this kind of scene that comes up. It's pretty funny in my opinion. Okay. All right, so Odysseus has been watching all of these people try this. He's still disguised as a beggar. And then he is able to reveal himself through this axe contest. Reveal himself as Odysseus. Okay, so Odysseus had tricked them all. After examining the mighty bow carefully, inch by inch, as easily as an experienced musician stretches a sheep gut string around a lyre's peg and makes it fast, Odysseus with ease strung the great bow. So look how quickly he's able to do it. He does it as quickly as a musician can do it. He held it in his right hand and plucked the string, which sang like a swallow song, a clear, sweet note. The suitors, horrified, grew pale, and Zeus made ominous thunder rumble. Odysseus, who had so long been waiting, was glad to hear the signal from the son of double-dealing Cronus. He took up an arrow which was lying on the table. The others were all packed up in a quiver, soon to be used. He laid it on the bridge, then pulled the notch end and the string together, still sitting in his chair. With careful aim he shot. The weighted tip of the bronze flew through each axe head and then out the other side. So first, notice how easily Odysseus is able to do this. You know, as easily as a musician. He's doing it all sitting down in his chair with careful aim. Yeah, he's kind of like, wow, amazing. He's got the signal of Zeus that he approves of what's going to happen. Okay, so Odysseus told his son, Telemachus, your guest does you credit. He means himself here, because as the beggar, he's the guest of Telemachus. Your guest does you credit. I hit all the targets, and with no effort strung the bow. I am still strong, despite their jibes about my weakness. So he's sort of revealing himself as Odysseus. Though it is daytime, it is time to feast, and later we can celebrate with music, the joyful part of dinner. So these lines are pretty funny. He says that it's time to feast, and they're going to have music with dinner. But actually what's about to happen is he's going to kill all these men. But he's going to kill them, while we have, music to accompany this slaughter. Okay, so with his eyebrows, he signaled, and the son strapped on his sword, picked up his spear, and stood beside his chair, next to his father, his bronze weapons flashing. So this is how Book 21 ends. The father and son, are united in their quest to kill all the suitors. They've disarmed all of the suitors. They've set up the dining halls so that it's easy to close all the doors and lock them, so that everyone's trapped in the room with them. And meanwhile, they're the only ones who are armed. So this is kind of like horrifying in a way. Kind of funny too, I guess. That's why I'm laughing. One little thing to mention about the connection to music. One thing that's interesting that Homer's doing here in likening Odysseus to a musician. So he strings the mighty bow as easily as an experienced musician stretches a sheep gut string around a lyre's peg. Odysseus strung the great bow. And then the bow makes this sweet, clear note like a lyre. Like if you play any stringed instrument, you know that like you can get musical notes out of the tension of strings. This might be a way for Homer as a poet to kind of align himself as a singer to a lyre, a poet, with Odysseus. So Odysseus is kind of like a musical poet here. So he's going to slaughter people to music, and then also the poet is going to sing of the slaughter with his lyre, just to remind you that the rhapsodes, the the poets at the time who were performing these poems would be singing them to a lyre. So anyway, that's kind of going on here too. Nice. Okay, so we're gonna have dinner with music. Yes, okay, so this is from book 22. Book 22 is the one where like all the slaughter sort of happens. Our translator uses this line, "Playtime is over." This is what Odysseus tells the suitors. You might recognize lines like this from like action hero movies nowadays. Playtime's over. Okay, here's an image to kind of go along with the scene of slaughter. This is from a bell crater, which is, it's excerpted from the whole thing, but I just wanted to show you the scene. But like down here would be like it's like a vessel with like it's on a stand, and it's a large vessel, and it's for mixing wine. So Greeks and later Romans, they don't drink pure alcohol. They like dilute their wine with water, and so they needed these big mixing vessels to mix wine and water together for a drink. So anyway, it's kind of interesting that like this vessel that would be intended for a party, like for like a banquet hall. So it's interesting that this vessel has this scene of a banquet hall that goes horribly wrong, you know, with Odysseus, I think this is Odysseus, and his son slaughtering all the suitors. So you'll note that like Odysseus and his son seem to be the only ones who are armed with real weapons, so like a shield and bow and arrow here. The suitors have been disarmed, and so they're turning to the only things that are available to them, which are like cups and like fruit and like maybe tables to protect themselves with. So anyway, they're just trying to fight back with any means that they have, but you know, they're very much at a disadvantage, even though they are many more in number than Odysseus and his son. So this might be a time to think about this, kind of the juxtaposition of a scene of slaughter with a scene of a banquet. There are other moments in the history of both Western and Eastern art and culture where slaughter and banquets kind of come together. I'm going to take this opportunity to try to think of some. Usually it's kind of also a scene of trickery, you know, the moments at which you feel most safe, you know, when you're eating, when you're joined in community together to eat. That's also the moment where these guys can take advantage of you, like people who have outsmarted you and can kill you. Ones that come to mind are like, there's a lot of like Yakuza, Japanese mafia stories where like an assassination takes place at a dinner. Or another one that comes to mind in recent memory is Game of Thrones. I don't want to spoil anything for you, but there's something bad that happens at a dinner. Anyway, playtime is over. Okay, all right, so now let's talk a little bit about this moment in the epic. It usually makes people very uncomfortable, but Odysseus and Telemachus make they make an emphatic point in killing all of the slaves that they have at their home who have been disloyal. And this includes even the young girls who have like had romantic relationships with suitors. So, you know, to my mind, romantic relationships shouldn't be punishable with death. Like, that's crazy. But according to the logic of this epic, they need to die. So let's talk about why. So after they killed all the suitors in book 22, there's talk of bringing Penelope down. They're like, oh, let's reconcile husband and wife now. The master strategist Odysseus said, no, not yet. Do not wake Penelope. Call the women who made those treasonous plots while I was gone. So let's not, you know, I don't want to see Penelope yet. Instead, I'm concerned about the women who made treasonous plots. So this word I've highlighted, treasonous, it's very telling. The women are bad because they've committed treason in a way. So what is treason? Treason is, if you're a traitor to your country, if you've committed treason, usually, at least in the past, and in some cases still now, if you've committed treason, it's usually punishable by death. It's a crime against your nation. It's like you're betraying your nation or your state to another nation or state. So in Odysseus's, diction here, he's calling the women who had plots with other men treasonous. They've committed treason. Okay, so Telemachus kind of like adds to this idea. Odysseus talks about killing the girls like just simply, like cutting their throats or something like that. Telemachus disagrees. He says, I refuse to grant these girls a clean death, since they poured down shame on me and mother when they lay beside the suitors. Okay, so somehow their treason is connected to the shame that they've poured down on the family, particularly Telemachus and the mother, when they lay beside the suitors. So what's going on here is basically like if you have sex with a man outside of the family, even if you're a slave, if you have sex with a man outside of the like home, you've committed treason, you've done something to shame the family. So I presume that had the girls slept with Telemachus, it wouldn't have been a problem, right? Because Telemachus is part of this family. This makes me very uncomfortable because like these women are enslaved. It doesn't really make sense to talk about sex as if it was consensual. You know what I mean? So this is really, kind of a screwed up situation. But anyway, these women's sexuality in laying beside the suitors is linked to their treason. And the logic here is very patriarchal. So like if you have a patriarchal system where the male figure is the means by which property and legitimacy is bestowed onto new generations. If a woman has made a connection with a different male, like from a different family, even if she's a slave, she's like polluted in a sense her the purity of her body. So like presumably, if these women have laid with suitors, they might get pregnant by the suitors, and then the suitors might have a claim on Odysseus's property, which would be these slave girls, who are his property by definition. That's how slavery works. It's a human being turned into property. Okay, so yeah, so that's what's going on here. So Telemachus refuses to give them a clean death because they've shamed the family. At that, he wound a piece of sailor's rope round the rotunda and round a mighty pillar, stretched up so high no foot could touch the ground. He's going to hang these girls. We have this epic simile that's very disturbing. As doves or thrushes spread their wings to fly home to their nests, but someone sets a trap. They crash into a net, a bitter bedtime. Just so the girls, their heads all in a row, were strung up with the noose round their necks to make their death an agony. They gasped, feet twitching for a while, but not for long. This is very, very disturbing simile that Homer uses, where the girls being hanged all in a line are being likened to birds trying to fly away but getting caught in a trap. So anyway, you might this might be something to write about in your Homer essay. Yeah. Anyway, to what extent is it their fault that they're caught in this net? One other thing to kind of bring up is this winding a piece of rope and tying the girls all in a row, and Telemachus doing it. I'm sort of reminded, visually at least, of Telemachus setting up all the axe heads in a row. Very interesting, right? That these kind of two scenes of such different things are likened, visually at least. Anyway, horrible. But yes, the idea is that Odysseus and Telemachus need to completely reset their home. Anyone who has made any sort of connection to anyone male who is not of the Ithaca family is now needing to be slaughtered as well. Okay, all right, so that's sort of like the logic of slavery, at least in this ancient world, and I think, if, the history of slavery since this time, we can also see similar logic guiding these sorts of things, that it's like a betrayal to make a connection outside of the family with the master and the master's son, that sort of thing. Okay, all right, let me know if you have questions about this or concerns. Okay, all right, so then let's kind of end today thinking about testing in the latter books. A lot of the last parts of the epic are about testing each other in order to see where the person stands. So Odysseus, remember, he disguises himself as a beggar to test everybody, to see if they're loyal to him. So he tests Telemachus at some point. If you are my true son, of my own blood, let no one know that I am in the house. Laertes and the swineherd must not know, nor any of the slave girls, nor even Penelope, until we have determined the woman's attitude. We must also test the male slaves and see who has respect and fears me in his heart and who does not, and who looks up to you as you deserve. The test here is like Telemachus needs to keep a secret. Keep a secret to Odysseus over and above the people who he's closer to, his grandfather, his surrogate father, the swineherd, his mother. This is kind of a big ask. You know, he had just met his father, really, but he has to trust him more than everyone else. Okay, so that's a bit of a test. Penelope tests the beggar, who is Odysseus in disguise, a lot. We talked about this last time. Stranger, I would like to set a test to see if you did host my husband and the men who followed him. Describe his clothes, what he looked like. Athena herself, she's testing Odysseus and Telemachus. Athena did not grant a decisive victory. She kept on testing Odysseus' courage and his sons. She flew up like a swallow through the smoke and nestled in the rafters of the roof. So the implication here is that even though Odysseus and Telemachus have the approval of the gods in slaughtering all the suitors, they're still being tested. You know, if they don't pass the test, then perhaps they wouldn't be victorious in this slaughter. Okay, so interesting. Kind of complicates the idea of fate in the story, at least. Penelope's dream, which we talked about last time, that might be a test as well. She's sort of potentially testing her husband to see how the beggar responds to this dream. So remember, it's this weird dream where she dreams she has these 20 geese, and this eagle comes and kills them all, and she cries. But then the eagle tells her, don't cry, you know, I'm your husband. I'm here. Aren't you happy? It's possible that Penelope is telling this dream to the beggar to test him, to see how he responds. You know, to see if he'll reveal himself as her husband or not. Interesting, potentially. You know, you might think about that a little bit more. But the last test that Penelope gives to Odysseus is the one that kind of like resolves the love story plot of the epic. And it has to do with this olive tree bed. Okay. So first off, I really like this scene. This is kind of like the husband and wife reunited, but very awkward around each other. So now they're both been, like Odysseus has been revealed to be that beggar. He's not in disguise any longer. He calls Penelope down. So Penelope went downstairs. Her heart could not decide if she should keep her distance as she was questioning her own dear husband, or go right up to him and kiss his face and hold his hands in hers. She crossed the threshold and sat across from him beside the wall in firelight. He sat beside the pillar and kept his eyes down, waiting to find out whether the woman who once shared his bed would speak to him. She sat in silence, stunned. Sometimes when she was glancing at his face, it seemed like him, but then his dirty clothes were unfamiliar. So look how sweet this is. It's like, you know, it's like picture your parents or like an old couple, you know, your grandparents or something, you know, kind of being shy and awkward around each other, waiting to find out whether the woman who once shared his bed would speak to him. Like, what a contrast between the past and the present. You know, they had been so intimate with each other, but now they can't even really speak to each other. They have trouble even looking at each other. So he's keeping his eyes down. She's glancing at his face a little bit, like peeking up at him, but then, you know, she's shy. It's very sweet. Telemachus scolds her, so I don't include what he says. He's always scolding his mother, so, you know, he's like, Mom, hug him. What are you doing? Anyway, whatever. He scolds her, and then she responds. Thoughtfully, she answered, My child, I am confused. I cannot speak or meet his eyes. If this is really him, if my Odysseus has come back to me, we have our ways to recognize each other through secret signs known only to us two. So she sort of reveals her strategy here, that she's being quiet strategically because she wants to recognize Odysseus and for him to recognize her in secret ways that they only know together. She's basically saying, like, mind your own business, Telemachus. You know, husband and wife business is not your business. So here's her test. She tells her her slave Euryclea, this is the woman who helped raise Odysseus. She says, Now, Euryclea, make the bed for him. outside the room he built himself. Pull out the bedstead and spread quilts and blankets on it. She spoke to test him, and Odysseus was furious and told his loyal wife. Woman, your words have cut my heart. Who moved my bed? It would be difficult for even a master craftsman, though a god could do it with ease. No man, however young and strong, could pry it out. So this is the test. And it seems to work. Like, Odysseus reveals himself as her husband with his words here by getting mad. So her test was that she tells her slave Eurycleia to pull out the bed and make it up for him, pull it out outside the room he built himself. And then we learned that the bed actually cannot be moved. It was like built inside the room and cannot be moved outside. So this is him getting mad. Like, what have you done to my bed? So anyway, she knows it's him because he's angry, which is kind of funny. So anyway, the olive tree bed. So it's described a little bit more here. There is a trick to how this bed was made. I made it, no one else. Inside the court there grew an olive tree with delicate long leaves, full grown and green, as sturdy as a pillar, and I built the room around it. So Odysseus, the sort of master craftsman, builds this bed around a tree that he really liked. So presumably he built the house as well. So he really liked this tree, and he built the room around it. So this is actually symbolic in a way. Olive trees, particularly for Greeks, are symbols of peace. The olive is associated with Athens and Athena. The olive branch, if you've ever heard that expression, like, I'm going to extend the olive branch to you. So if I'm extending the olive branch to you, it means I'm trying to I'm doing a gesture of goodwill. Usually the olive branch is when people have been fighting and you want to make a gesture towards peace. Like, I don't want to fight anymore. Here's an olive branch. Do you accept my desire for peace as well? And then the other person, can accept it or reject it, whatever. But so the olive tree might be a symbol of peace for their marriage. It certainly is a symbol of a living thing that changes. So associating their marriage bed with life and change is the exact opposite of, immortality, the thing that Odysseus was tempted with earlier in the epic. His bond with Penelope is one about life and humanity and living and immortality. And so it might be tied tied up in their bed as well. It's a symbol of intimacy between them. Okay, so after he explains this, they reconcile. So at that, Penelope's heart and body suddenly relaxed. She recognized the tokens he had shown her. She burst out crying and ran straight towards him and threw her arms around him, kissed his face, and said, "Do not be angry at me now, Odysseus. In every other way, you are a very understanding man. The gods have made us suffer. They refused to let us stay together and enjoy our youth until we reached the edge of age together. Please forgive me. Do not keep bearing a grudge, because when I first saw you, I would not welcome you immediately. I felt a constant dread that some bad man would fool me with his lies. There are so many dishonest, clever men. That foreigner would never have got Helen into bed if she had known the Greeks would march to war and bring her home again. It was a goddess who made her do it, putting in her heart the passion that first caused my grief as well. Now you have told the story of our bed, the secret that no other mortal knows except yourself and me, and just one slave, Actorus, whom my father gave to me when I came here, who used to guard our room. You made my stubborn heart believe you." So he's told the secret that only they know and one slave. So apparently no one has been in their bedroom. Yeah, so basically now we know that, like, no one has been in their bedroom. Like, Penelope has not let anyone else into their bedroom. She's been sexually pure and to him. And so he knows that now too. She knows that he's the same man as he was if he, and they both know that they've kept the secret all these years. So great, husband and wife back together again, really nice. But very sweet moments in this speech. She reminds us that the gods made them suffer, and they really haven't had much time together. They refuse to let us stay together and enjoy our youth until we reach the edge of age together. Yeah, can you imagine, like, spending 20 years away from the person you love the most? They missed out on all those moments together that they could have enjoyed together. And then also notice that she refers to Helen again, in light of a foreigner taking her away from her home. So anyway, this sort of like sort of reference back to the Trojan War is interesting in this moment of reconciliation between husband and wife as well. Okay, so lovely. And then we have one of the most famous moments in all of the Odyssey. Okay, I'm going to spend some time with this. First, I'll read it. This made him want to cry. He held his love, his faithful wife, and wept. As welcome as the land to swimmers when Poseidon wrecks their ship at sea and breaks it with great waves and driving winds. A few escape the sea and reach the shore, their skin all caked with brine. Grateful to be alive, they crawl to land. So glad she was to see her own dear husband, and her white arms would not let go his neck. Okay, so the reason why this is so famous. Well, on one level, it's just sweet. Like it's a hug between a husband and wife who haven't hugged each other in 20 years. So that's quite nice, just in and of itself. But note the simile. We start off with describing the hug from his perspective. He held his love, his faithful wife, and wept. We end with describing the hug from her perspective. So glad she was to see her own dear husband, and her white arms would not let go his neck. So it's this kind of symbol of a hug from his perspective and from hers, and the same goes on with the simile. Okay, so he's holding his love, Odysseus holding Penelope, in a way that is likened to a shipwrecked sailor and the shore. So here's the simile. As welcome as the land to swimmers when Poseidon wrecks the ship and breaks it. So he's holding her as if he is a swimmer and she's the land. Right? He's so grateful after a shipwreck, where few escape the sea and reach the shore, their skin all caked with brine. This stuff literally happened to him. He's been shipwrecked many times before in this story. And so him hugging her and weeping is like how he felt when he was a swimmer, convinced he would die, and then he washes up on shore, and he's so grateful to be alive and crawling to the land. So on one level, that's what's going on. It's like he's reminded of all of his past journeys where he nearly died at sea. But then the simile swaps to her perspective. So glad she was to see her own dear husband. There's a way in which Homer is emphasizing that Penelope also is grateful to be held by her husband like a swimmer who has been shipwrecked and crawling to land. So she's grateful to be alive, crawling to land too. So glad she was to see her own dear husband. Her white arms would not let go of his neck. So in a way, Homer is suggesting that all that Odysseus went through in his journey is in a way equivalent to all that Penelope went through in waiting for him. You know, she's just as grateful as a swimmer, washed up on shore, as he was. So anyway, this is kind of it's a very famous moment because it implies an equality to their relationship that is interesting given the ancient times, you know, especially in their sort of ideas about gender roles and everything, that like her waiting for him was just as treacherous and difficult as his trying to get home to her. Okay, so lovely, we have this moment. They seem very connected, you know, as husband and wife here. And just to remind you, back in book 5, the simile is inverted. So back in book 5, Odysseus is lost at sea and encounters a shipwreck. 2 days and nights he drifted on the waves, expecting he would die. But then dawn brought day for the 3rd time, no breeze, total calm. So the sea starts getting calm, and then he's lifted up by an enormous wave, and he sees the shore nearby, and then there's a simile when he sees the shore. It's like when a father lies sick and weak for many days, till at last the gods restore him back to life, and his children feel great joy. Odysseus felt the same joy when he saw land. So seeing the land is like being back together with your family. And then in this one, being with your family is like escaping a shipwreck, is the idea. Okay, so lovely. So just to remind us again, remind us of Odysseus' choice in this epic. He rejects Calypso. He rejects immortality in this epic. By reminding Calypso and us of his choice of suffering and his choice of home, all being wrapped up with his choice of Penelope. Odysseus says, with tact, do not be enraged at me, great goddess. You are quite right. I know my modest wife, Penelope, could never match your beauty. She is human. You are deathless, ageless. But even so, I want to go back home, and every day I hope that day will come. If some god strikes me on the wine dark sea, I will endure it. By now I am used to suffering. I have gone through so much at sea and in the war. Let this come too. So what's interesting with Odysseus is a man who chooses mortality. In choosing Penelope, he chooses death, in a sense. He chooses a lot of other things. He chooses their relationship. He chooses his home in Ithaca, his kingdom there, his son. But he is also choosing to die when he could have chosen not to. So notice how love and pain are linked totally. There's a suggestion that without pain, do you really even have love? You know, is love possible for immortals? You know, they don't really have, they don't have to suffer as much as mortals do. What else is there? Okay, so yeah, you might think more about this. The Odyssey is lovely, and to my mind, because it is about a human who chooses humanity with all the suffering that implies. Okay, so I'll stop that there, and we'll just end our discussion of the Odyssey with thinking about Book 24, which is pretty interesting book. Some people think that it's not a part of the original Odyssey. If you read the introduction to our text, our translator believes it is part of the original Odyssey. I believe so too, although I'm not an expert in classics, but it just seems to fit in my mind. But anyway, what's going on in Book 24 is all of the souls of the suitors go to Hades. That's the sort of underworld of the dead. There they have a funeral for Achilles described, which kind of, to my mind, reminds of the funeral of Hector from the Iliad. Agamemnon and others, I'm sorry, it's not Agamemnon. Agamemnon and others reminisce about convincing Odysseus to sail to Troy. So they have this kind of like bookend about Troy at the end of Book 24. Odysseus tests his father, Laertes. This is a moment that people don't really like. Odysseus is kind of an asshole to his dad. Odysseus wondered whether to kiss his father, twine around him, and tell him that he had come home again and everything that happened on the way, or question him. He thought it best to start by testing him and teasing and abuse. So we have this weird moment in 24. Like, if you compare this to the Iliad, Book 24, where father and son relationships are so honored, and they're really the kind of core of the emotional ending of the Iliad, here in the Odyssey, the father-son story is kind of like made fun of a little bit. Odysseus sees his aging old father, wants to kiss him and tell him about all of his journeys, but on the other hand, he's tempted to test him with teasing and abuse. And Odysseus chooses to do that because he might not be a very good son, in my mind. Okay, so anyway, there's that. And then what I want to end with today, there is the threat of war again. There's a cycle of revenge and the intercession of the gods that end the epic. So the threat of war comes with the family of the suitors. So recalls Odysseus and Telemachus have killed all of the suitors. This is a lot of young men from the surrounding area. When people are killed, usually their family wants revenge, and that's exactly what happens here. So a lot of the families of the suitors come to Ithaca, and they're like, dude, what the heck? Like, you killed our young men. We're going to bring war to Ithaca. And so there's like this threat of war breaking out at the end of the Odyssey, particularly troubling after the Trojan War, which was so devastating to this whole generation of Greeks. And Homer chooses to end with this sort of moment of unsteady peace. And here are the lines ending the Odyssey. So first, it's interesting that Athena, she pops up again. So Athena, I think she's in disguise as Mentor again, and in disguise as a man. She says, Ithacans, stop this destructive war, shed no more blood, and go your separate ways at once. Her voice struck them with pale green fear and made them drop their weapons. They were desperate to save their lives, and they turned back towards the city. Unwavering Odysseus let out a dreadful roar, then crouched and swooped upon them, just like an eagle flying from above. But Zeus sent down a thunderbolt, which fell in front of his own daughter, great Athena. She looked at him with steely eyes and said, "Odysseus, you are adaptable. You always find solutions. Stop this war, or Zeus will be enraged at you." He was glad to obey her. Then Athena made the warring sides swear solemn oaths of peace for future times, still in her guise as mentor. So, very interesting ending here, where the Ithacans themselves are fighting against each other, threatening a sort of civil war. The Ithacans, when Athena tells them to stop fighting, they agree, but notice that it's Odysseus who wants to keep the fighting going. Odysseus let out a dreadful roar and crouched and swooped upon them like an eagle flying from above. This is really interesting. Like, is this Odysseus's fighting spirit coming out again? Is it like PTSD, as a soldier, his post-traumatic stress disorder or whatever, coming out, where he can't get outside of his soldier mentality, or he wants to fight some more? So he starts fighting again, and then Zeus sends down a thunderbolt. So this is a big symbol, right? The king of the gods sending down a thunderbolt, threatening destruction if he continues. And then Athena, the goddess of wisdom, wartime strategy, says to him, "Odysseus, you are adaptable. You always find solutions. Stop this war, or Zeus will be enraged at you." So this is a really important moment where Athena, the goddess of war, wartime strategy, instead of helping Odysseus come up with like a really great strategy to kill people, like she did with the Trojan horse, like she did with killing all the suitors, here the war strategy is peace. Odysseus, you are adaptable. You're the polytropic man. You're able to find solutions. You always find solutions. So she's telling him to turn his adaptability and his cleverness and his complexities to stopping the war instead of causing more war. And so then he's glad to obey her, and then they swear oaths of peace and stuff. So anyway, this is very, very interesting, kind of ending by plugging peace over war. So we are reminded again of the Iliad here at the end of the Odyssey, and sort of the implications of a vast conflict where only really destruction happens. Anyway, so that's the end of the Odyssey. I look forward to hearing what you guys think of it.